out of the year with Emma Salisbury, who's just going to introduce herself now.
Oh, thanks very much, Caroline. Hello, everybody, and I'm so glad that I'm very honoured to be invited to be the last author of the year. This is a great honour, so I hope I come across okay. We had a slight technical difficulties logging in, so I'm a little bit thrown, but hopefully I'll get over those pre-nerves. Yeah, my name's Emma Salisbury. I write 2 crime fiction series. One is a police procedural set in Manchester. It's actually set in Salford, which is a city in Manchester. And I also write a gangland thriller series set in Edinburgh. I'll probably spend the majority of the time talking about my Manchester Police procedural series, since I have a new book out, hence When Darkness Falls. And that's book 7 in the Manchester series. I started writing the police procedural series about 6 or 7 years ago, and the readership has grown tremendously. I've had some great feedback over it, because the detective Kevin Coupland is quite droll, some would say grumpy, very straight, very clear. He doesn't sort of pull his punches, but gets the job done. Readers seem to like that. They seem to like the reality of the series as well. I tend to write about quite dark topics, not deliberately. It just works. It just happens that way. I think over the years, I've written several novels covering a range of topics, from murder-suicide, human trafficking, football hooliganism, quite a lot of challenging subject matter, but there's the characters beneath that seem to appeal to readers. And I think that's really what, when we pick up a crime novel and we want to enjoy it, I think what we're looking for is not just the plot and who did it at the end, but how they maybe got there. But more importantly, the characters. We want to care about the characters involved. And readers really like Coupland, his colleagues, his peers, and some of the challenges that he finds himself in. So thankfully, because of that feedback and encouragement, I've just continued to write and focus on the Manchester series. I find it great fun, and I'm learning something all the time. I'll become a 5-minute expert on every topic that I'm researching at the time. No, it is super fun.
Why did you choose to set them in Manchester then? Why Salford?
Well, if you can tell from my accent, I'm a Lancashire lass. I grew up in Manchester, and it was somewhere that I knew very well. So I felt comfortable setting a series based on that. I think, there's this general legend that people should write what they know about. And I do know Manchester very well, and the people and the northern humour. So I felt that it was appropriate to kind of focus on that, really.
And I've read the first novel in the Coupland series, and it starts off quite, it starts off with a punch, doesn't it? It starts quite, quite dark. What inspired you to write that story?
Well, the first book in the series, Fragile Chord, I'll just show readers the cover of that. There's Fragile Chord. It was actually inspired by an article I read in the Sunday papers many years ago by a journalist, and the heading was that we all cling to sanity by a fragile chord, and it was about a murder-suicide that had happened in Greece. And I found it quite moving and quite frightening as well, because this involved ordinary people, an ordinary family. So I was intrigued, wanted to learn more about what makes people do these drastic things. So carried out a lot of research. And the bottom line is this: there's something in all of us that can be a trigger. So I thought, well, how can I weave that into a story? Because the very subject matter, you know who has done it right from the beginning. So it's not really a who done it. That's the one that is more a why done it. Why did this thing happen at the beginning? So we then have to unpick that story. So I tried to think, well, what possible circumstances could there be that would make this, in this particular case, make this mother do this awful thing? And how can it be handled in such a way that it's not just sensationalist? It's more about, I'm hoping that it's been handled sensitively. And the feedback I've got from readers, they found it challenging in terms of it's made them think, well, this could happen to me. You know, how can I stop this happening? So I tried to balance it with a subplot as well to take away some of the darkness, but then I did make both plots meet at the end. I do kind of like that, how you can link two seemingly completely unrelated stories and bring them together. I do kind of like that type of story to read myself. So I did put that into the plot. And that, when I wrote Fragile Chord, obviously it was the first book. I didn't know that Coupland was going to take off in the way that he did. So Fragile Chord actually reads with other characters probably taking centre stage with him. And it was only really the feedback from book one, where, because of things that happen in his personal life, readers were sending me emails saying, oh, you know, what's going to happen? And it was about him that they were intrigued about. And I thought, oh, okay, so maybe he's the star of the show kind of thing. So I focused more about his personal life going into the second book, which was A Place of Safety.
So you sort of said in your introduction that you've touched on quite a range of dark topics. Is there anything you wouldn't write about?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think there's anything I wouldn't write about. And I think a perfect example of that is the latest book, When Darkness Falls, is about sexual exploitation around the dark web. Now, if you just look at that as a headline, some people might say, oh, that's going to be too dark or too... But I think it's how you write about it and approach it. It's not explicit in any way. It's written sympathetically to the victims. In fact, really what it's about is how the victims that have been involved in that exploitation in some ways have been marginalised by the press, by the police, by the social services, in the same way that I think the scandal was opened up a few years ago set in Rotherham, where there were girls that were being groomed, and for many years they weren't being listened to. So there wasn't a crime because nobody was actually reporting what the girls were saying. And it was only when a social worker actually started to listen to what they had to say and encouraged the investigation that it blew the lid off that. So it's a similar kind of investigation that I'm carrying out. You think you're going down one route, but actually you're going down a different route. So I think, Caroline, what I would say is I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I wouldn't cover, as long as I was very careful. It was written sympathetically to a level that I'm happy to read. I don't like to read anything graphic. I don't like anything that's going to play on my mind. I think we all have busy, stressful lives, and I don't think we want things that are going to give us nightmares necessarily, unless somebody wants to go into the horror route. So I like to keep it more about the intrigue and the mystery rather than anything else.
So we've got some nice comments on the stream already. Samantha, who's my author chat partner in crime, says she's from Salford.
Oh,
so
great.
Look forward to reading your books. Sheila Bugler's watching, and she says hello, and she's one of our author members. She was on last night interviewing Chris Whittaker.
Oh, wow.
She says, what was your journey to being published?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a great question. It was a bumpy journey. I wanted to write probably for as long as I can remember, but did nothing about it. When I left school, I didn't feel that people like me could go into writing as a career. So I went down a traditional route, got an office job, and did that for many, many years. And it was only about, I'm going to say 15 years ago, I woke up one day and thought, I'm so dissatisfied with what I'm doing. I really want to have a go at writing. So in my spare time, after work, before work, whenever, I just used to jot down ideas, and one idea led to another, and I created a plot. And then there's all this, when somebody's looking to get a book published, certainly back then, you had to get an agent. And there were all these stories that it was how difficult it was to get an agent, and how you had to entice them with the first 3 chapters of your novel, and they'd make a decision on that and then invite you to send the rest of the novel in. So in typical Emma style, impatient style, I thought, well, I'll just write the 3 chapters and I'll send it in before the novel's finished, because nothing's probably going to happen. So why waste my time? Well, I sent this particular novel in to many agents. You literally go through the A to Z of the Writers and Artists Yearbook and work your way through it. But 3 got back to me and said, can we have the final manuscript? Well, I nearly fell off my chair, because of course there wasn't one. So I then spent, and I'm embarrassed and ashamed to say it, but probably 3 weeks trying to complete another 70,000 words or something. So the book was rubbish, because you can't write a book in 3 weeks. Well, I can't. So nothing happened with that. But I learned a very valuable lesson, and you really have to make sure that something is as polished as it can be before you submit it anywhere or do anything with it. So sort of fast forward another couple of years, I completed a book, sent it in, and signed with an agent. And that was great. And people said to me, oh, that's fantastic, you've made it. Because 85% of people, I think I bumped into Mark Billingham somewhere, because I'm a big fan of his, and I'd said to him, oh, I've got an agent. And he said, oh, that's great, because 85% of people that sign with an agent will get a publishing deal. Well, obviously I was one of the 15%, because 3 or 4 years later, still hadn't found a publisher. And the reason was because it never fitted onto any of the particular markets that they were looking for. The feedback we'd get was, love the story, but could it be set somewhere else? And I did move it around sometimes, because you're really desperate. You want recognition. You want to get on the, actually get out of the blocks. So I changed location a couple of times. I set a story in the Peak District, for example. And then another feedback would be, well, we really like it, but can you change the main protagonist? Now, at the time, Coupland didn't exist. This was pre-Coupland. And so I changed protagonists. And it would go on and so on and so forth. And you can't just change a name. You can't just change a character. You have to rewrite the book. So this would, again, fast forward 2 or 3 years. And it had gone through all the gatekeepers at one particular time. And then we got to the 11th hour. And this publishing house said, we really love it, but we want something set in Scotland. Can you write it, set in Scotland? And I just threw my hands in the air and said, I can't do this. I can't write books for other people. I believe that there's a tribe out there, if you like, that would like things that I write, but I can't get, to get to them, I have to go through these people. So I threw my hands in the air, and a very good friend of mine said, have you heard of Amazon? Would you be, have you thought about putting the book through Amazon? And I thought, well, don't know how to do that. So that took a long time to try and get a full understanding of what was required, how to produce professional books and ebooks. I know some people will think it's a simple task, but I have to, it's an awful lot of work to do that. And over the years, I've hired copy editors, proofreaders. I have an army of people that read it before it goes anywhere near the copy editor, book designers. So I have a full army of skilled professionals who help me create each book. And that's essential, because I couldn't do that on my own and produce it to the standard that I want it to. then when I wrote Fragile Chord and released it, and the feedback was immense, and there was suddenly a market of people out there that wanted to read more about him, and I was delighted to carry on. So I produced A Place of Safety, which was about a drive-by shooting, but again there was an undercurrent of another story that connects the characters, and I do encourage the reader to become quite sympathetic even to the shooter. There was a lot going on in it, but people loved it and were asking, well, where's the third one? And I wrote One Bad Turn, which was about football hooliganism, but it's not for football fans because I don't understand the game. It was nothing about that, but it was just something that happened back in the days when there was a lot of violence around football back in the early 90s, and I wanted something that was going to trigger a chain of events later on. So all these things kind of happened. In the meantime, Fragile Chord became one of the most downloaded books of the year. I won an Amazon All-Star Bonus Awards. I was offered a publishing deal, which I was able to turn down. And then my audio publishers contacted me, and I signed worldwide rights to release the whole Coupling series on audio. So it's been a tremendous journey, but it's the old cliche of it's taken me probably about 12 or 13 years to become the overnight success that people assume that you are. So I don't get too carried away with it because it's been hard graft, and it continues to be hard graft, but I love every minute of it. It means I can write full time now, which is fantastic. And so I just spend, every day getting paid for having my head in the clouds, which is all I ever wanted. So I hope that
Samantha, it did. It was a really good answer. Sam asks, did you use real places from Salford, or did you alter places to suit the story?
Oh, yeah. Yes, there are some real places there. And I love the fact that readers contact me and they'll say, oh, we drove past that place, or we drove past the traffic lights, or, people will be doing the school run and they'll say, we can just picture Coupland coming out of that building. So there are very real locations there. But then occasionally, if you're writing something that maybe is a little bit dark, or you're suggesting that there's criminality going on, then obviously you don't want to make it in a well-known place. So I will make up those addresses, or be very, very vague where something is, because I don't want to cause offence. But I know that people do like to try and find where the places are, or recognise them. So yeah, I'd say it's probably 60-40.
Do you have things on your website, or have you ever attempted to have like pictures of Coupland's Salford?
Do you know, that's a great idea. It's never occurred to me, but I'm going to make a mental note of that. I think that's super. I know that, as I say, the readers really are interested in him. Through the books, as well as the main plots, there's an undercurrent. The reader gets to know him. Although he's, very happily married and adores his family, he did have a troubled past, but it takes a while for the reader to learn about that. And along that way, things happen, obviously, that will impact him quite significantly. So I have, from time to time, for members that have signed up to my newsletter subscription, have written odd things that are personal to Coupland, like, for example, his own personal playlist, the types of music that he likes, because surprisingly enough, it's the kind of music I like. So there's a lot of Oasis and Stone Roses and things like that tracks that he's picked on his playlist. And I've written the odd sort of blog where he's probably in a fictional pub meeting with somebody. I think I did that a couple of Christmases ago. So just little fun things, because he does feel like a real party, always sort of at the back of my shoulder, really, just always there. So, but that's a great idea, actually, Caroline. I think I'm going to do that.
So you said you have some books set in Edinburgh as well?
Yes, I do. I several years ago thought, wouldn't it be good to have the opposite of a police procedural series? I mean, I love crime fiction in all its styles. And I think most people like a police procedural because there's order and resolution at the end of it. You know, they can follow the investigation, and they hope that the good guys and gals will get the person at the end. I think that's what they hope. But living in Edinburgh and working in Edinburgh, for a good 10 years, I was working with socially excluded young men, which could often be, you know, they've come out of prison and they're looking to get employment and housing, and seeing close up some of the issues that they faced. And some of those issues were around simple things, such as because they've got a bad name or a reputation, it was very easy for them to be blamed for other things that came up, or it was easy for them to be picked up and taken away. You know, I'd find them a job and then find that they'd been lifted from that job at lunchtime because something had happened. And even though there was not necessarily any evidence to pin them to it, they were the convenient ones to take away and be questioned. And so there was that level of unfairness that I thought, this is really quite frustrating. And I wanted to explore that. And so I created a fictional character, Davy Johnson. He has just been released from prison, and he's a real anti-hero. You wouldn't expect to particularly like him at first because, as I say, he's come out, he's got this, you know, his prison record, he gets a job, but he's picked on this constable that you know, has taken a dislike to him and was behind him getting arrested in the first place, sort of follows him around, and without too many spoilers, frames him for a murder. The problem is that being framed by a member of the police, he couldn't go to the police to look for help. So what could he do? His only option was to go back to the people that he promised his mother that he'd turn his back on. So he was going back to the crime gangs to try and clear his name. So it turned into a cat and mouse, where he had to go on the run to keep below the level, below the radar. And he had to enlist the help of his known scallies, if you like, to try and help him and clear his name. It was great fun to write. It's written in the first person, so it's very fast paced. And the reader's learning in real time everything that he's learning. And yeah, it's very much a cat and mouse type story. I got awesome feedback from it. Absolutely. I think I wasn't sure at first whether people would like that kind of take, but Edinburgh's got a dark underbelly. And I think it worked very well that it was set there, because there's you know, lots of crime in terms of drugs and all sorts of things that are going on. So it was a great place to set a gangland situation where they help each other and support each other, so that there was kind of like two empires going on. So given the feedback that I had, I wrote the second book to Truth Lies Waiting, which is called The Silence Before the Scream. And it resurrected all the characters from that first book. And that is another, it's written in the first person, real time, an awful lot of cat and mouse chasing going on. So it's a complete different from the police procedural, but the feedback has been tremendous, and I am constantly pressed to write a third, and I keep saying I will get round to it, but it's very hard to change your mindset when you're writing one series. You know, your head is set in one location, one set of thoughts, to then get to the end of that and start from scratch again with another mindset. It is quite difficult. So I haven't yet mastered how I'm going to do that, but there's an awful lot of demand for a third Davy Johnson book, and I do feel guilty that I haven't brought one out. So you've heard it here. I'm on the case.
You'll get there eventually. So with the police procedurals, do you have an expert? Do you have like some police people that you speak to for research?
Yes, I do. I also have my Bible, which is, you can see by the thickness of it, the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, which I refer to all the time. But yes, I do. I have some people contacts that have been in the police who have been very happy to lend their expertise, and very, very much on a personality level, as in how culturally the police teams can operate. What is it like trying to get promotion in those environments, and also the nitty-gritty of how things are solved. I mean, there was a query I had regarding the automatic number plate recognition in When Darkness Falls. I wanted to try and be certain as to how a particular car could be picked out. And so obviously we're in lockdown or ease down or tiers or whatever it is at the moment, but I could just do a little text and get a text back with from a super contact with all the information that I needed. So yeah, that's essential, because it cuts through an awful lot of time, and it's not just the facts that you want, it's that little anecdote that they'll say, oh, well, yeah, actually there was a time when we did this and then this happened, and you think, oh, I love that, and I'll save that for another time. So yeah.
Well, following on from that, Sam's asked, have you ever had to change something procedure related once you've received advice?
I've had to tweak things. I mean, sometimes things haven't worked, not so much from a procedural thing, but from a simple diary maintenance thing. And I'll give you the example. When I'm writing, I tend to be a by the seat of the pants type of writer. So that just means I just get my head down and write as much as I can without real thought as to plotting. But now I'm at sort of, book 7. It does help to have a little bit of a plot, a little bit of an outline, so that you know that you're not covering the same ground, or you're not repeating something. But there was one particular point, and it might have been when I was writing, I think, Flesh and Blood, which was book 5. And that opens with a scene, and it's about an arson attack that leads to an awful lot of other things going on in Coupland's life. But one of the people that is killed in the arson attack happens to be the sister of a gangland leader, so who's hell-bent on revenge. So there's an awful lot of things going on, and to keep the reader with it, giving them as little to think about as possible other than the plot, I like to give them handholds. So I'll say if it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or whatever, sometimes, or prior to, I think, Flesh and Blood, I used to say day 1, day 2, day 3. And then on this particular book, I thought, I'll be quite clever about this. I'll actually name the days. And we got to a day when Coupland was due in court. And I realised that it was the weekend and he wouldn't be in court. And then there was another point where somebody's child was going to be picked up from school, and it was the weekend and they couldn't be picked up. And so, yeah, I had to completely rearrange a course of events. So I had to throw in, and again, I had to use my contacts for that. Well, what things can happen that will buy me this time? So I gave, he was given rest days and training days and various things, and it moved us into the following week. But obviously there's a knock-on effect with that, because it may be that certain things have to take longer, or you don't mention them at all till later on. So yeah, I don't think you can see it on the back wall here. I don't know whether it's, you can just see there.
Yeah, you can see a bit.
That's my murder wall. And basically what I do is I write constant notes. So every sheet of paper is a chapter, and I just keep myself right with things. So there are little cross references and action notes, a bit like when you take minutes of a meeting. So I might say, if somebody's sending something off to forensics, then I'll have a little note, and I have to mark off when it's come back. So those are like my little check-in mechanisms, and that helps me then move around. And it maybe I can swap a day and move things forward or back. But yeah, it taught me a lesson there. Sometimes you can be too clever for your own good, and if you're too clear with when your days of the week are, then you really got to make sure that public buildings are going to be open on those days.
So a question I like to ask people if they're writing a series is, do you keep a character Bible?
Yes, I do. I'm just looking for it now, actually. Oh, I've moved it. Yes, I've got a little book, and it has all the foibles and quirks, and it's essential, because my memory is not what it used to be, and the characters are growing arms and legs, and they've become real people. So there are either children's names, schools, cousins, pets, addresses, partners. There are so many things, because you try and colour them in as much as possible to give them a full character, but you've got to remember all that. Who's just changed the car, what make have they got, what model have they got, who's now in a relationship with who, and so on. So yes, I'm forever referring to that and adding to it.
So Sam asked if there was a character of yours that lives in your head more than the others.
Well, it has to be Coupland. I mean, even though, because people sometimes ask me, "Oh, your main protagonist is a man," but Kevin Coupland is in my head virtually all the time. I can be going for a walk, and there'll be a conversation going on there, and he'll just pipe up. And that's why I always have to hand as well. I think I've moved things around this afternoon, but my notebooks and my notepads, I always have something to hand so that I can just jot something down, because he's full of quips and one-liners and little sarcastic retorts. And if I don't get them down, then I can't reproduce them later with the same degree of accuracy. So yeah, he lives there all the time. I sometimes will discover other characters. I might think, oh, well, we could do with somebody like this or somebody like that, but he's the one that has the voiceover that is constantly in my head.
So you published yourself on Amazon originally. How much of a say then do you have in all your book titles and covers?
I do. I mean, the one beauty of producing and self-publishing is that you have total control. The downside, obviously, is if it isn't working, I suppose you don't have anybody else to collaborate with. But I've assembled a really good team in terms of, as I say, copywriter, proofreader. So I get feedback. They might say, well, look, why are you doing this, or why are you doing that? Is that the right thing to be considering? But it does come back down to me. And that was the thing that I found a bit frustrating when I did try the traditional route, was hearing feedback, well, can't you set it in Scotland, or can't you set it in the Peak District, or can't you make that man a woman? And I did find that really frustrating. So I've been able to focus on what the readers are telling me. I mean, at the end of the day, the readers are shaping these books as much as I am, because they're saying to me, we really love the way that he goes about putting the world to rights. And I think Coupland is an everyday hero. It's a very realistic series. He doesn't jump out of helicopters with machine guns. It's not that kind of hero. So if you like your down-to-earth sort of Happy Valley type characters, then you will like this kind of series. And he is, as I say, he's sort of got his quips and his gallows humour that just sort of lift it, even if it's sort of dark. But I do feel that I have, total control. I mean, it's interesting dealing with an arm's length publisher when I deal with my audio publisher, but they're great to work with. They trust me, and they listen to what I've got to say, and it just works really well. So I suppose it's a case of when it works, it's fine, but you've got to be prepared to put in the hours and just have a belief in yourself. That's the tricky thing. I think because so much of the time you're on your own in a room. The door's shut, curtains are often closed, and you've just got to have this self-belief that what you're writing is going to be enjoyed by the folk out there. And of course, you don't get a proof of that till publication day, and then you sit back and try and breathe for 24 hours, 48 hours until you sort of get the feedback, and then that's the wonderful feeling of it, because you hear that people have thanked me for keeping them entertained during lockdown. They've said they've discovered the series. Those that have discovered it recently, and they've read all the books in sort of a week, and it's just given them a complete distraction. So I'm very honoured. I feel very humbled by that, because I get just as much pleasure writing about it. Writing has kept me distracted during lockdown. I mean, I wrote When Darkness Falls. I started that in April, and I did that because I just couldn't cope with what was going on in the news. I didn't know how to deal with it. So I do actually refer to the lockdown in the book, because I had to try and make some sense of what was going on around me, and I felt fearful, angry, just trying to get a better understanding. So that was written in several parts through the book, and then at the end, halfway through, I sort of thought, well, is this a good idea? Because will people want to read about lockdown? Is it something that they're all going to want to put out of their minds and hope never existed? But here we still are. And after this weekend's news and revised guidelines, people need distraction. And again, feedback I've had people email me and through the website and message me and say that I've handled it really well, because it's on everybody's minds, and they felt a kind of reassurance in the way that it was referred to. It's not centre stage, it's just part of the backdrop, it's part of the story, because quite frankly, I can't imagine now, because the books are written quite realistically, I can't imagine not mentioning it if that's the way we're living. In the same way, as a contemporary crime writer, I can't imagine writing a story where a mobile phone doesn't exist. I can't imagine at the moment writing a story where I'm not mentioning what's going on along streets and houses and goodness knows what. So yeah.
How do you find doing the marketing aspect?
Well, it's not my forte. If I could choose, I would just sit in this room with the door shut and the curtains closed and just type away all day and not have to do anything. I am slightly intimidated about stepping out into the light and speaking to people in groups and that. And I do know back in the day when we were doing author tours and going around places, I used to always have butterfly nerves at the prospect, just in the sort of 10-15 minutes leading up to going out in front of people. I felt very uncomfortable. It's, as I say, I like to write, not to act, not to speak. But then when you turn up and you realise that people have chosen to be there because they want to find out more about the books, it's wonderful feeling. And then suddenly you're talking about something that is within your comfort zone. At the end of the day, it's a little world that you've produced. So I settle into it. But yeah, it's that can be tough. The constant need to be able to be in front of people and speak about it. But it goes with the turf. So it's kind of something that you just have to get on with.
Is there an event that you miss? So when we get to what my husband calls the after times, is there an event that you're most looking forward to going back to?
In terms of writing or in terms of life in general?
Both.
I mean, I'd love to just go for a restaurant meal, but and I'd love to go on my holidays. I'm missing my holidays. But I think we've had to all adapt and do talks and things by screen and by Zoom, and I think they've actually worked really well. So in some ways, it's been a great learning curve being able to do that. But I do think readers enjoy coming up afterwards and speaking and having those little asides with you, which obviously they can't do online. And that's sometimes where you get some amazing feedback or anecdotes, and sometimes you can learn quite a lot. I mean, I've written about psychologists in some of the books, certainly in Sticks and Stones, and there's often some sort of medical professional discussing a character trait in some of them. And I've had psychiatrists come up to me at the end of book signings and things and say, well, look, I found that really fascinating, because at first you sort of think, oh, what did I do wrong? Or I've had social workers say, look, that's really bang on what you've written about such and such a thing in Flesh and Blood, or Absent. I've had professionals comment on that. So it's a two-way street. So I miss that interaction, because it's hard to get that. But I think just generally, won't we all enjoy not having to think about masking up and sanitizing and justifying where we have to go? It's I don't think it's healthy looking inwards all the time. I mean, when you do it for a living and you're a writer, you kind of that's what it is. But I don't think it's generally healthy for the whole population.
There's a nice comment on here. Sam says, after hearing you say Scally, she's raring to get reading. She loves authenticity in a book.
Oh, fantastic. That's nice. Yeah.
Jason Kelly, one of our admins, has asked what authors have been an influence on your writing.
Oh, wow. Okay. I absolutely loved, still love his books, John Harvey. I think his Resnick series was, I think that was the first one that really got me interested in a particular detective, got me interested actually in finding out more about the series of books. So yeah, I love his books. I'm a huge fan of Mark Billingham. I think Tom Thorne has been superb in terms of another character that comes to life. I was late to the Rebus party, really. I've read the later books, but I actually like Malcolm Fox. So I kind of like the around Rankins series, and for sheer the books I tend to enjoy are the ones that don't hold anything back. The kind of warts and all. And Denise Mina really can sock it to you, and I do like those kind of characters. So some of my characters are they're troubled. They're definitely troubled, and the descriptions can sometimes be in a way that are hard to read, because they're so real. We've all probably had days where we felt maybe challenged about certain things, and but I know that I probably appreciated when I first read, as I say, like Denise Mina, the way that she would, even with aggression, she's got quite aggressive women characters, and I like that. And they've got reason to be. They've had, they've been treated very badly, and but you're not pitying them. I think that's what I like. So I kind of like hard-hitting crime novels, hard-boiled, if you want to call it that. Those are the kind of things that appeal to me, and that's really the kind of thing that I say that it interests me to read, and it fascinates me to write.
So I've spent an enjoyable afternoon recording my top 10 books of the year with the rest of the author chat admins. What would be in your top reads of the year?
Oh goodness. Okay. Well, I've just finished, because one of the wonderful things when you finally finish writing your book and it's out there is that period of time before you start on the new one when you can actually read, and it's wonderful. So I've read several books, and I've got to say, Denise Mina's The Less Dead, awesome. That was superb. I don't know whether you've read that, but I really, again, I mean, I won't spoil it for anybody, but I knew from the first sentence I was going to enjoy that. I also have discovered Susan Steiner. And I think she has 2 or 3 books out, and I've worked my way through them. So I thought they were really good. And I enjoyed those because they were kind of the opposite of what I would normally go for. So it was stretching me in a way, because I think the main protagonist isn't necessarily a natural person to take to. And I think that's done deliberately. So I kind of liked that challenge. So yeah, and I did read Mark Billingham's Crybaby. So I had to wait because obviously I had to get mine out of the way before I could pick it up. So that was a treat, being able to read that. So yeah, I mean, there's been so many really. I have literally just, book after book after book, because my to be read pile never gets opened until I've finished, and then I can, with a clear head and time, just devour them. So yeah.
But Susie Steiner, apparently Mark Billingham recommended her during a book signing, according to Sam. She says they're really enjoyable reads.
Yeah,
she's a massive Mark Billingham fan. She's dying to get him on to be interviewed because he's a member of the group.
Well, I mean, I used to, every time I used to come to the Edinburgh book festivals, I always used to go and see him, and he was always so, really nice and down to earth. I think his shows are great, and he's always been very encouraging. So, but I'm a big fan of Tom Thorne. I think he's super. Yeah, I hope one day that maybe Kevin Coupland can get on the screen as well, in the same way. That'd be fantastic. Who knows? Maybe Tom Thorne and Kevin Coupland could work on a case together.
Have you got an image of Kevin Coupland? Do you have an idea of who'd play him?
Well, I didn't have an image, and I deliberately didn't describe him other than well, at the time when he first came into being, he was early 40s, but in Sticks and Stones, I actually give him an age, and he's 43 in Sticks and Stones. Dark haired with some grey around the temple. And then I say very little. I've talked about his body shape because he's since he came into being, he's been on a healthy eating regime, and he's stocky, but it's been fascinating. I've had in the early days, people were saying Robert Glenister. That he reminded of them then, and then very recently Tom Hardy. And at first I couldn't see it, and then readers were sending him the picture of Tom Hardy that they were meaning, and I thought, oh wow, okay, right. So yeah, there's been some amazing suggestions. I try not to think of either of those characters, either of those actors. I do have in my mind's eye who I think he is, but I don't want to put that picture into the reader's mind. I think some of them have got quite a soft spot for him, given some of the feedback I get. I get little messages saying, Coop is great. They call him Coop. So there's something maybe going on there, and I think it's the way he thinks of his wife and his family that is appealing. I think it's the way that he interacts in his relationships, and maybe that makes him attractive to readers, but in a way that isn't overtly attractive. So I don't think it's any physical characteristics, but I think he's just an attractive character. So yeah, I get feedback that makes me see him with new eyes. But I try to keep my idea of him alive when I'm writing, rather than suddenly give him abs or, you know, the six pack or something. I think that'd be a nightmare.
So you've talked about the reader feedback and like messages to your website and things. Do you read all your reviews?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't sit and wait for every review, but I do ultimately read every review. I read everything that comes in. I mean, sometimes I do switch off the machine and I don't interact for 24 hours or 48 hours just because, you know, you need a break or whatever. But I think if somebody's taking the time to write something, then it's important to read it and learn from it. I think we're all a bit fragile in terms of ego when we produce things, whether it's art or a piece of work, a piece of writing or something, and it matters what people think of it. It also provides a kind of validation. It justifies what we're doing. I mean, I'm honest. I don't write just for the sake of it. I want to entertain, and I want to entertain well and hear that people are enjoying the books. So it's, you know, when I get that kind of comment in whether it's a message or an email or a review, it's always better as a review, because that seems to be the currency, certainly, that authors need to encourage more readers to come along and try us. But it's very important, and you can learn from it as well. I mean, sometimes I suppose I've been fortunate, really, but I think even if I look at, you know, negative reviews, you can maybe learn something from them. Although you get the odd one that's just completely off the charts. I mean, I had, I think, a very early review for Fragile Chord where a reader had commented in a review the fact that he'd had a bacon roll and he dipped the lid of the roll in the bacon fat before he'd eaten it. And she actually said, nobody eats like that. And I'm thinking, well, I eat like that. And that's good enough for me. So, you know, sometimes people take it to the nth degree. But that aside, no, I think it's good to take the time and read them, not to get too carried away by them, because, you know, I think at the end of the day, it's great if they're good. If they're bad, don't beat yourself up, and tomorrow's a new day.
So a fair point. How do you come up with all your character names?
Oh, well, finding character names is really hard, because you don't want it to be too obvious. So you don't want a name that brings too much attention. So what I've done in the past is I've maybe done what traditional authors do, baby name books or characters from shows, or looked on the internet. And then for a while, what I used to do was I'd ask, if I had girlfriends round for a few drinks, I'd ask them for names. And so that, you know, before they'd leave at the end of the evening, they'd give me a few names. But what I've done for my last two books, Sticks and Stones and When Darkness Falls, is I've invited subscribers to my newsletter to name characters. And that has been an overwhelming success. It's been fantastic. I tried it with Sticks and Stones, thinking, I wonder how this is going to go. And, you know, the caveat is a case of you'll not know whether it's a goodie or a baddie. So you've got to be prepared to be on either side of the fence. Obviously, otherwise there'll be spoilers. And they went for it. And it was great fun, absolute great fun. And there was one reader got back in touch with me, and she said, I can't believe it, because I'd made her character hum during meetings. And that's mainly because I do a lot of humming when I'm out and about. I'm forever doing it. And she said that she does that. She's told that she does that normally. So she just thought that was, bonkers. And so I did it again this time for When Darkness Falls, and you worry a little bit. Well, I worried a little bit, thinking, I hope, because suddenly you've got this other pressure. It's not enough that you want people to enjoy the book, but you want the readers that have now got characters named after them. You want them to like the characters. What if they don't? What if they're offended? What if they're hurt? What if they're this? Wow. It has been phenomenal. The feedback, absolutely, they've loved the characters. It's worked really well. And again, some similarities. Can't believe that that I've mentioned such and such a thing, because that resonates with them on a personal level. Some emotional stories. Some of the things that I've written about, people said, well, that's so close to home in many ways. So yeah, that's been great fun. So I think I'll definitely continue with that, because it's worked really, really well, and it takes the pressure off me trying to think of all these names. So yeah.
So we've only got a few minutes left. I'm just going to read you a few more comments up here from Sam. She said she's loved the interview and she's off to buy some books.
Oh, fantastic.
And then she's followed that up with, do you sell signed copies?
Okay, well, I have been asked during lockdown for this, because people haven't been able to get them in person, and I have done it, yes. It's just been on an individual basis, really. And it's been mainly for people that have had the character names. They wanted a copy or something. So yes is the answer.
Maybe just get in contact with you through your website.
Yes, yeah, and then I can make it personalised or whatever. Yeah.
Nice. Do you want to just finish off for us with a little recap of you and your books?
Okay. Well, look, it's been great fun. I write two I write two series of crime series. One is a police procedural set in Manchester, featuring the grumpy DS Kevin Coupland, and the other is a gangland series featuring straight out of jail Davy Johnson. I hope you get a chance to read them and enjoy them at some point, and I'm very happy to discuss them further. But thanks so much for the time today. I've really enjoyed it, Caroline. Thanks for having me on. And I hope viewers have enjoyed watching it.
I'm sure they will. Thanks for being our last author chat of 2020 as well.
Well, Merry Christmas, everybody, and hope Santa's good to everyone.